My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm Cloud Hired.
So I'm Cloud Hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am Cloud Hired. Thank you, Mike and the GlowCloud team.
Welcome, everyone. This is Mike Gibbs, and I'm here today to help you build your technology career. Maybe you have a goal of becoming a cloud architect, or a security architect, or an enterprise architect, or an AI architect. Well, we want to help you get to your goals. I can remember early in my career where I first was leaving internal medicine and then moving into networking. And I remember I didn't know what to do, and I asked around, and I got the worst advice, which caused me to take a whole bunch of certifications and courses that I totally didn't need at all. Spent months and months and more money than you can possibly imagine. And then when somebody finally told me what I needed to do and I got great advice, poof, almost overnight, I had my first job. It was a senior engineer. 3 months later, I was the lead architect. 2 years later, I was a principal solutions architect. And that was the beginning of my career. And it only got better because I got the right advice from people that could help me. And that's why I'm here. And I come on once a week to answer any questions you have related to architecture careers, like a cloud architect, solutions architect, AI architect, enterprise architect, even chief architect type roles, because I've done them all and I'm happy to help you. So before I start taking questions, and please bring me your questions, bring me your architect career questions. I want to help you. I wanted to tell you that tomorrow we have a completely free webinar on how to become a cloud architect. We'll go over the cloud architect role. We'll talk about the actual cloud architect skills, the real ones that you actually need to be hired versus the silly ones you see in a ridiculous job description, which was written by HR. We'll talk about what you need to do to get hired, how to show you're ready to be hired, how to build yourself a brand. And then after we answer that, I will answer any questions you have. If you think you're absolutely ready for the job and you want a mini interview on that webinar, I'll give you one and I'll tell you if you're ready. And if you're great and ready, I'll probably call a recruiter for you myself. If not, I'll tell you what you need to learn and I'll do anything I can to assist you. So join us on our free architecture webinar tomorrow. And this is the 4-year anniversary for Go Cloud Careers. I mean, I've always been coaching people, and I didn't intend to actually create this company. I did it because I saw what was out there. I saw what kind of training existed, and I knew I needed to come out of my retirement and take something and get everybody hired. So I did this about 4 years ago. We have a 60% off sale right now. In the last 4 years, people we've worked with are now at Apple, Amazon, Cisco, Google, IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, Kalian, Archetype, LeaseWeb, Zscaler, Palo Alto Networks, NetSpoke, and so many other organizations. And I'm so proud of that and excited by that. So there's a 60% off sale for our business anniversary, and there's the deepest discount we can and will ever do. So take advantage of that if you desire. So let's bring me in some questions because I want to help people build their careers. Mike, can I talk about how stressful cloud architect roles are compared to other IT positions? So, Tillian Hughes, I'll tell you what I thought. So, I've had stressful jobs in my life. I was a paramedic in my youth. It's the way I paid for college because I couldn't have afforded college anyway. I worked as a paramedic and I took a bunch of student loans. So, I did that while I was in college. And then after college, I was an ER nurse. And then after that, I learned to practice internal medicine and I worked with emergency patients. So, to me, that was a stressful job. Then after I took that job, I became a network engineer. Now, the good news is because of the way I prepared, because of the way I learned, and because of the way I studied, I moved into a senior role. I was at WorldCom. They had a network engineer 1 through 4. I was instantly hired as a network engineer 4. And then when I was there, I'll tell you, in those 3 months that I was an engineer, that was probably some of the most stressful time in my life outside of healthcare. That was rough because when you're an engineer and things break, you're coming in at 2:00 in the morning to fix them. And when you're working with a bank, for example, and those systems go down and millions of dollars are being lost every minute or every second, and there's people that are so frustrated and screaming in the background, that can be stressful. And then I became an architect. My first network architect, solutions architect, cloud architect, enterprise architect, I've done them all. And instead of being that person that's really stuck and handling all the workload, all of a sudden I was given the credit card and I was taking the engineers to lunch or the client out to lunch. Instead of people coming to me and saying, Mike, it's broken, fix it, we're losing money. It was, Mike, could you come talk to us? And I'd go talk to a client and I'd speak to their leadership. I'd determine which key stakeholders I needed to do. I would evaluate the organization's business and their key business processes. And then it actually came down to key business processes. And then after that, I would, figure out what kind of technology they would need by leading a technology team. And I'd help craft a new technology architecture by leading an architecture team. And then I got to present it back to the client and have meetings back and forth and lunches and dinners and clients. I never thought I'd play so much golf in my life. I actually had to take golf lessons for my architecture career. So for me, having conversations, taking clients to dinner, playing golf, leading a team was pretty easy and non-stressful. So I'll tell you, the architect job was the least stressful job I ever had in my life. In fact, when I was a solutions architect or when I was an enterprise architect, I used to get home from work and my wife would say, you look happy. And I'm like, yeah, people pay me to actually do things that I wouldn't even consider work. I got to talk to people. I got to meet people, which were some of the most fun times of my life. Go meet some people. I had conversations with people in England. A week later, Scotland. A month later, I'd be in Dubai for a couple of weeks. A month later, I was in Australia. I got to meet people, learn their problems, and be able to help them with it. That was the best job in the entire world. So I kind of hope that really helps. So I loved it. I don't think it's a stressful job at all, at least compared to what else I've done. Hi, Dingleman. Always good to see you. Hi, Mike. You're getting a serious look from a major law firm. I could see that, knowing you. Since they don't have a huge IT division, what areas do you think you should focus on in an interview? So what you're really talking about is if this, I'm assuming this is for a security architect. So the reason they're looking for a security architect is they're trying to mitigate risk. So a law firm knows what their actual risk is. They know where their exposures are. They understand the regulations and they know the cost of a breach, both in terms of what it could do to legal defense strategies, for example, what it could do with regards to liability of the firm. So they are, if they are a major firm, they do have real technology needs because there's a lot of documents and there's a lot of data. There's trails of evidence that need to be preserved. So, and if your trail of evidence gets damaged or anything happens along the way, it becomes invalid and they could lose a case. So keeping the systems having their confidentiality, integrity, and availability does matter for them. Now, why are they hiring an architect? If it's a security architect, it's to protect from harm. They're looking for someone that can protect their business because ultimately, Dingleman, at the end of the day, they have two choices. They've got a lot of choices. They can't, well, they're probably not going to ignore most of the risk, especially since lawyers are sort of in the risk management, risk mitigation business. So, they're not going to be ignoring risk. So they're either going to have to transfer the risk to an insurance policy with like cybersecurity insurance, or they're going to have to mitigate the risk with technology, or most likely they're going to need a combination of the two. So they're looking for you as a person that can come in and mitigate risk. So what this means, realistically speaking, Dingleman. So one thing is you're going to have to be able to understand the laws and regulations that apply to that industry. You'll have to be able to help work with them to craft the right kind of a policy of all the controls that need to actually occur. Although something tells me, Dingleman, that I think they probably have the policy crafted fairly well, especially if they're a law firm. And in many cases, when I did for example, my CISSP the first time in 2003, there were a bunch of attorneys in my program, and they were there for a reason, because a lot of them get involved in governance, resource, and compliance, and a law degree plus a CISSP looks awfully good. So they're going to be concerned about that. They're going to be concerned about, can you understand how to protect data? Will you be able to understand how to get data from point A to point B and integrate it with all the other systems that need to occur? They're going to want to understand if you can understand system integration and pain points and how you would secure those system integration pain points, because law firms will have to connect to other parties outside of their extranet partners, for example. They'll have to subscribe to certain law type feeds and other things. So kind of keep these things in the back of your mind. They're going to be looking for your ability to come in, to walk across that organization, to deal with people of a lot of executive value with big attitudes, and be able to manage across those types of organizations and control that. They're looking for you to be able to come in there and be able to come in and identify those risks that organization has from a technology perspective, determine what kind of the right mitigation plans you would possibly need, and then help lead the team of all the security people to actually take care of that. They're looking for you to help define incident response procedures. They're looking for you to help with business continuity planning, meaning, what happens if something were to occur? Where could the people work? How would you protect the employer safety? How would you keep critical operations up and running? But they'd also be looking for disaster recovery planning, which is more about how you would keep track of things. They are obviously going to be a distributed environment, typically speaking, where we're dealing with large national law firms. And because of that, we're going to have some degree of wide area networking that you need to secure or some form of zero trust and encryption strategies. And you're going to need a lot of ways to actually send and receive encrypted type messages. So they'll be very not concerned about your knowledge of public key cryptography, for example, encryption technology, data protection, data encryption, and the such. They're probably not going to be creating that many custom applications where you're doing a lot of application security, but there'll still be needs where you'll need to understand it with regards to integrating to other providers. There will be network boundaries, so you're going to obviously need to know some network security like you would anywhere. This is going to be a place where they really could probably benefit from some heavy duty IAM. When I mentioned zero trust, I'm thinking like context aware IAM type environments. And you got to really think about, really, how do you protect that kind of data? How do you classify that data, mark that data, and then protect that various levels of data? So I think there'll also be some data loss prevention things they'd want you to know about for this kind of a role too. But of course, all goes to the ability. They want to know your executive skills. They want to see your presentation skills. They want to see your leadership skills. They want to see your executive presence. They want to see your level of emotional intelligence and dealing with others. So that should help you a little bit. And hopefully, we'll get to see you in class a couple of times before then and work with you on a few other things. Mario, and then please help with us who are spread thin with your technical skills, how to recast a resume. You want to make sure that the topics was addressed because you've been a Cedar data architect all the time. So I made my resume and interview responses data centric, and I want to refocus myself. I'm trying to think if I can understand what you're trying to say. Bear with me one moment. And I think somebody from our team responded to you, and I think you sent a resume to our team. So if that's the case, let me have a look at the resume fairly quickly, and then I'll get right back to you. If that's not the case, just bear with me, because for some reason I remember thinking of someone from my team actually responded to a resume. So I am correct. Your name did come in. And first thing I would tell you, Mario, is you can't be an enterprise architect and a solution architect at the same time because they're completely different. An enterprise architect is focused on business transformation, people, processes, and technology. And a solutions architect is concerned with designing, presenting, and selling a single technology. So the first thing at the top of your resume makes me concerned about your background immediately. Now, the next thing is, as an architect, we have to be executives, which means we have to be able to describe what we can do and what we can do for a business. And we have to be able to do that in about 25 to 30 words or less. When I look at what you sent us, honestly, I can't understand it from an executive perspective or the person that's going to hire it. So there is that. Now, when I look through the rest of what's in there, it's not really a resume. And so I do think that you need a couple of things. If you want to, your first thing I'm going to tell you is that your past does not define you. Whatever you've done in your past has nothing to do with what you can do in the future. You can be absolutely anything you want. Now, I will tell you, to move into one of these architecture type roles now, you're going to need to have a lot of those communication skills and leadership skills and executive presence and sales skills. And, all of that's going to be neat there. And if you have those skills, you'll understand how to position things in your resume. So you're going to need to get those skills somewhere, because the way it's written as if somebody had an engineering background, which is great, and then is trying to turn that resume into an architecture resume. It looks like someone maybe did some design engineering on that resume. But realistically speaking, these are what we're kind of looking at. So while, if you're saying your resume needs work, I think it's more than the resume. I think you need to really understand the role, really learn the role, and really have the skills that are actually on that role. And I think if you do that, you'll have absolutely no problem getting to your goal. Normally, I don't get to look at people's resumes. It turned out I see this name Mario, and I saw this other name Mario, and I saw somebody responding back and forth to it. So I thought maybe it was the same person. So it's more than the resume. So if you're going to be an architect, it's not where you're thin or thick with technical skills. It's that you have to have the right architect skills. And I'm saying this for everyone that's here. As an architect, you're going to have to be able to give an architecture presentation, and you're going to give presentations all the time, including the last interview of the job. In the architecture role, you're going to have to sell the solution across stakeholders, across leaders, across business and technical decision makers, including selling your internal management to give you resources in your team. The architect, you're going to have to know how to communicate at an executive level, meaning how do you put a ton of content into an executive who only has 30 seconds to read it. And the only reason they have 30 seconds to read it is their time's worth $15,000 an hour to the company. And they lose $15,000 an hour for the business every time they're not working. So they've only got 30 seconds. So how do you put a lot of content in 30 seconds? What we're also talking about in architecture skills is the ability to understand the business, evaluate the business, find weaknesses and inefficiencies in the business, and then craft a technology solution to do that. So that's called business acumen. There's also going to need to be a level of executive presence, communication skills, and real pristine grammar in whatever language you're working in. When I speak Greek, and it's my second language, my grammar is terrible. I try to speak Spanish, and my grammar is terrible, even though sometimes people understand. But if we're going to be doing business in that language, we really kind of have to get to that place where we have that polish and panache. Now, when we come to an architect, Rob, even a data architect, most of it is not going to be with that data. It's going to be understanding the business needs, understanding the business goals, understanding the business challenges, understand where that business is trying to go. Are they trying to do agentic AI? Are they trying to create a small language model? Do they need a large language model for their business? What are their data hygiene practices? Where is their data coming in from? How are they mapping it? How are they reducing it? Not how to do the actual work. So, and I don't really teach data architects. I teach cloud architects, enterprise architects, security architects, but we're still talking about that business side and that leadership side and that executive side. So if your goal is architecture, it's not about the technical skills being too thin. It's you're going to have to get the right technical skills, and you're going to also have to get the right business skills, mostly the business skills. But it's not the how-to skills. It's the how to things design. Why should I choose Apache Cassandra over MongoDB when I've got two options? Well, which one's going to be better for which workload? Now, that is something I might consider. Now, if we're going to create this data environment, what do we use? What kind of tools are used for mapping and reduction? What kind of hygiene practices are placed on that data? What kind of cataloging is going to be done on that data? What kind of mining is going to be done on that data? What are we doing with it? So we have to think bigger. So what I really think I'd focus on is, I would say, right now you're in engineering, figure out what you need to do to learn architecture, if that's your goal. And then once you have that, then it'll be easy for someone, you'll know what to put on your resume. What I see on your resume, someone that knows what an engineer is putting down all these engineering things on there. And that's why it seems to be struggling, at least when I review the resume. Now, obviously, this isn't a resume review. You asked for some questions on the careers, and when I struggle with the question, I tried to interpret it with the resume we saw earlier that you had sent in for one of my staff members. So I kind of hope that helps. If you got another question, please ask in the chat box. I really would love to help. Chris, if you want to bring in the next question. So too, stopping by to say hello, Mike. You're a part of the Go Cloud Careers Architect program. Well, that always makes me happy. I'm always thrilled to hear from our students. And you couldn't be happier. That makes me even a lot happier. You recommend all of our architect programs. Thank you so much, Satu. I really appreciate that. Are most cloud jobs based on-site or remote? The reason is that most jobs you see in your area are network or health desk. So, Adrian, let's be fair. It depends on how good you are, and it depends on where you are. So I've been working from home since 2001. In 2001, what I ultimately did is I moved to Florida, even though I had a house in New Jersey, and I was going back and forth for a little while. So I was working from home. And then in 2003, I just had enough of the New Jersey, New York cold winters, and I moved full-time into my Florida house. Now, that's when I started completely work from home, because Palm Beach, Florida didn't have a lot of big offices. Now, working from home meant in those days that I'd fly to New York, I'd fly to Boston, I'd fly to Chicago, I'd fly to Dallas, I'd fly to Houston, I'd fly to Raleigh, I'd fly to San Jose, I'd fly to London, I'd fly to Dubai, I'd fly to Melbourne, I'd fly to Sydney, I'd fly to Brisbane, I'd fly to Hong Kong, because I was in architecture, and architecture is where your clients are. But what we're saying is, what happened is we did the work from home thing. Productivity went down very sadly. Employers were struggling with people that were called overemployed. They had 3 and 4 jobs full-time, working the same hours during the same day. Employers had to fire a whole bunch of people about it, and then they said, come back to the office. So what you're going to see is it depends on the company, and about half of these jobs are going to be mostly remote, and about half of them are going to be full-time. If you are great, nobody's going to ask you to come to the office. I mean, if you're really, really great. And I can tell you why, because I can remember, I'll give you an example. In 2003, a lot of my team, I was on a team, and there were a bunch of engineers, and I was a sales engineer for a short period of time. And then I went back to architecture, and there were 3 sales engineers on the team, and 2 of the sales engineers went to my manager every week and said, Mike doesn't come to the office. Mike doesn't come to the office. We're here every day, and Mike stays home at his home in Princeton, goes to the customer, and then goes back to his home in Princeton. We need to get Mike in his office, so you got to get rid of Mike. And Adrian, my manager, said, you are all sales engineers. Mike's at the customer site all day long, and oh, by the way, Mike's bringing in a whole heck of a lot more money than you. So stop complaining about Mike not being here. Stop sitting around and complaining, and go out there and sell. So if you're really great, you'll be able to get away with it. If you go above and beyond, if you work harder, you'll typically be able to get away with it. But if you're going to work from home, you better put out 30, 40, 50% of the work the employees are doing in the office. And that way, when anybody complains, your manager's like, well, look, when you're as good as them, then you can say something. In the meantime, don't worry about it. So I kind of hope this helps. But they can be either remote or local, or a combination everywhere in between. Dwayne, hi, Mike. Nice to meet you. So nice to meet you too, Dwayne. What certificates would I recommend for wanting to become a cloud architect? You recently passed your AWS CCP. So, Dwayne, I'm going to do 2 things. One is, in the description of this video, there is a document that is how to become a cloud architect. It's going to cover every skill you need. I'd like you to go to the description of this video at some point, or Chris from my team, drop it in the chat box so you don't have to get off the video. And it's going to tell you exactly what you need to learn. I'm also going to tell you, Dwayne, that tomorrow I'm going to run a completely free architecture webinar where I'm going to go over the role, I'll go over the job, and I'll tell you every skill you need. And the reason I'm going to do this, Dwayne, is 90% of these skills are not covered in any certifications. I'm going to say it again. 90% of the architect job is not covered in any certifications. Now, that doesn't mean I don't want you to get certifications. And I do, and I'll tell you which ones I recommend and why. So, Dwayne, the reason I say certifications won't get you a cloud architect job is here's what we really do as an architect. We speak with the executives about in the organization to find their vision and goal for the business, where they want to be now, 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And when you speak to the C-suite of a business, you have to speak in another language about different things that they care about. So you have to learn both business to be able to do that, and you have to learn what's called CXO relevancy. Now, in order to actually communicate with the C-suite and be taken seriously, you're going to need executive presence. I'll shut my executive presence off. I probably have $80,000 of executive presence training, and I'm not joking. So here's what I was before the $80,000 or so of executive presence training. Hi, everybody. My name's Mike. I'm an architect with 25 years experience. So you're going to have to learn how to build executive presence, how to walk in, command the room. And we teach that stuff to our clients. So we'll teach all these skills, but you're going to need to learn it. And you don't have to get it the way I got it with actors and executive coaches and special presentation coaches. But, you do need executive presence. And I teach our clients as well as all these skills. Now, you have to understand the architect's going to sell. And the largest architecture I've ever had to help on and help sell was $1.1 billion. But you're going to have to sell an architecture to the client. And that means you're going to need really good sales skills. Now, you're also going to need good executive communication skills. Now, you're going to have to build an architecture team and lead that architecture team to create and design your architecture. So you're going to need some very good leadership skills. You're going to have to walk across an enterprise, which means you're going to need stakeholder management skills. And in any cloud architecture, you're going to have 50 to 100 different vendors that are outside of just your cloud provider. So you're going to need some strong vendor management skills. Now, in order to do the design, you will need to know you'll need to understand the data center, which is really the cloud. So things like servers and server virtualization, functions as a service, application virtualization on the compute side. On the storage side, things like block storage, object storage, file storage. On the data side, you'll have to understand when you would use NoSQL databases versus relational databases versus data warehousing, and how would a data pipeline be designed, and how and why would data be mapped and reduced and extracted, loaded, and transformed. Not how to do any of these things, thankfully. And then it'll be things like which applications you can use to drive your transformation and how the applications can integrate to each other, which is a whole lot of different things other than how to build these things. And then you'll be looking at security and how you create the security architecture from an IAM strategy, but also things like network security, things like firewalls, IDS, IPS systems, and data protection, things like data loss prevention strategies, things like end-to-end encryption strategies and storage encryption strategies. And there's other components that go through it. And Dwayne, I'll list all of them. Now, while we teach all of these in our 1,000-hour training program, every skill, because you won't get hired without it, please understand that the certifications are the name of something and how to configure something, which we don't really do. So I still want you to get the certifications, and here's why I want you to get the certifications. These certifications will make your resume look great. And maybe the certifications teach you 10 or 15% of what you actually need for the job, which is still good. And as long as you're learning the other skills, who cares? So certifications equal job interviews. Skills equal hired. We teach certifications plus skills. Why? Because if you have the certifications, you get the interview. And if you have the right skills, you can get any job you want. So that's what we do. So the certifications we teach and recommend, and you can get these certifications from somebody else if that's your goal, or they're included in our training program, are TOGAF 10, which is an architectural framework certification. And it is a professional certification. We either want the AWS Solutions Architect Professional, or the Azure Solutions Architect Expert. We're going to update our recommendation to include the Google Professional Cloud Architect, and I've already filmed the training for that for our students as well to make sure they have that option as well. And for security, we use the CISSP because that certification is so good at getting people interviews. And truth be told, that certification also helps people think more like an architect. And we found that to be an incredible certification profile, and our students get lots of interviews with that. And then with what we teach them, they get hired. But come to the webinar, and you'll know the entire set of skills. And if you want to go get a business school to learn half of these skills, that's up to you. If you want to learn them in our academy, that's up to you. All I care is that you have a great architecture career and you know everything you learn. So join me on Zoom. It's completely free. And we'll talk about it. If you desire our courses right now, they're on sale at 60% off, with how it most never happens because of our anniversary. But we'll do anything we can to keep you to your goals when we teach architecture. Or even if it's a Zoom webinar where we just tell you what you need to learn and you can figure out where you want to learn them, I just want to help you. I'm like someone that has spent years in healthcare working long hours on being on call. Do employers expect the same from you as a cloud architect? Ta 3000. What I can tell you is, what my wife, a couple of my wife's friends came over the house. My wife is a nurse practitioner. She is extraordinarily good. A couple of physicians, a couple of nurses came over. And what some of the nurses said is, Mike, being in healthcare is like institutionalized abuse. Meaning the patients are mean to you, the management has no money and they're so constrained and they're mean to you, and then everybody is just angry and frustrated. And that's what healthcare feels like. You don't have money for any of the budget you need. You're constantly fighting with an insurance company to get them paid, to get your patient care is what they need. You're trying to find some way to get something paid for you so your patient can have a surgery to save their life. And when you get home, you're always worried, did I do everything I could for my patient? Did I miss anything when I did my rounds at the hospital? Because I don't want to miss anything. I don't want anybody getting sick because I missed something. This is a stressful job. And then I became an architect. In my case, I became a network architect. And all of a sudden, and I am not joking, on my first day here at Mike, you got to get your American Express card. And Mike, we're taking this client to lunch. We're going to take him for sushi. And I was like, well, I haven't had sushi. I don't even know if I can eat sushi. I'm a little worried about this whole sushi thing. And then they're like, Mike, you're going to learn to love sushi, which I did. And I took that client to sushi 3 days a week. And I took that client to Mediterranean food, which is more what I'm used to, another 2 days a week. Now, I went to meetings. I had conversations all over the world. I facilitated meetings. I'll be bringing in, let's say I've got a security architecture. I'll bring in Checkpoint. I'll bring in Fortinet. I'll bring in Cisco. I'll bring in Palo Alto and say, hey, show me what you got. And that way I can evaluate each and every one of their offerings and evaluate all trade-offs compared to what's going to be best for our business. So to me, this is the easiest job I've ever had as an architect. I will rank them in terms of stress. In terms of fun, I will tell you the paramedic job was probably the most fun I absolutely ever had. But it beat up my back. I have a lot of herniated discs from carrying people down the stairs and getting them out of cars, hanging upside down, that kind of thing. I will tell you, being a nurse was probably the worst job I have ever had in my life. I have the most respect for nurses. They're some of the most incredible people in the world. But I'll tell you, that was the hardest job that I ever would have imagined. And then I became a nurse practitioner, practiced internal medicine, and I actually did love that. I really did. But tech was just my biggest passion. And I'll tell you, compared to any of those jobs, the architect job was simple. And quite frankly, I became an engineer for 3 months before I moved into architecture. And while engineering was nowhere close to as stressful as, say, being a nurse, I will tell you that being an architect was so much more toned down and relaxed. So, Faiz, I want to ask you a question in the chat box. I want to know what job you are actually looking for to make sure you're not looking for a cloud architect job and then asking about a demo account. And I will get back to you, but I want to make sure I understand which career it is. And cloud engineer, DevOps engineer, cloud architect, because the question you're asking, in many cases, the reason people don't get hired as architects. I want to make sure we address that when I know more about your goal. Chris, let's bring the next one in. How much does a cloud architect earn annually? So Samuel Joseph, it's going to determine how good they are. And it's also going to determine their business acumen skills, their leadership skills, and their executive skills. On average, the average cloud architect gets paid about $200,000 a year. The average principal solutions architect, principal cloud architect earns about $380 a year, plus or minus 100,000 more. Now, the key is the reason why I say how good you are is, there's a lot of architects that are earning far more than that. If you've got a really good cloud architect with really good executive skills and really good leadership skills and really great business acumen, often you call them enterprise architects, chief architects, CIOs, CTOs. There's plenty of $800,000, $500,000 to $800,000 jobs a year. So it all is going to determine about what you do and how good you are. Here's the difference between a great architect and a horrible architect. A great architect can walk into their client's business, understand their client's business, and create a technology strategy that's going to align the organization's people, processes, and technology. So if you've got a retailer that's doing $50 billion of sales and your architecture can increase their sales by 2%, that could be $100 million business impact. If I did the numbers in my head that you just made. So paying you $1 million is nothing. So we have to understand what your goal, what your real scale is how much digital transformation you can do. So your salary is going to be determined by, can you walk in? Do you understand the organization's goals? How good are you with the C-suite? Can you go in there and understand the business architecture like a strategy consultant? Can you map out the org chart? Can you map out the business architecture? Do you understand that business's value streams? Do you understand how that business gains competitive advantage? And then can you then figure out how to work with that organization to create the right way that people can work? Because if you've got an organization with 100,000 people, you want all 100,000 people doing it in the most efficient way possible. That's finding the correct process. And then you want to supercharge those employees by giving them technology that gives them a competitive advantage. And at the same time, you want to remove any friction that you have or challenge to getting the customers to want to do business with you easier. That's what we're trying to do within digital transformation. So if you've got those skills and really good at business acumen, at the same time, then you can create an architecture team of 50 people for the next 6 months to evaluate something, lead an architecture team for the next 6 months to design something, create the organization cultural for change, create the dynamic for change, get the stakeholders buy-in, get the support, create the training materials. Now you're a $700,000 or $800,000 architect. So it all depends on what you do. The closer you are to the business, the more transformation you can drive in the business, the more you earn. The closer you are to technology, the less you will earn, because we're looking for a strategist, not a tactician. I hope that kind of helps. Thank you for the advice. You're right. And your resume is really several years old and not updated for cloud architecture because of all the migrations you've been doing. You're a gift to humanity. Thank you so much, Mario. Happy to help. Idris, you're currently a blue-collar person working in steel production. Well, thank you for doing things that are necessary to make our infrastructure and lives work. You make well above average money, great. But this space has ran its course in your life and you're ready to go head first into architecture. Terrific. And, that's the thing. You can do that. Most people don't realize how important it is to have people that actually create stuff. We don't have steel. We don't have buildings. We don't have cars. So that work is very important. But it's also very hard. But it doesn't matter. And if I got your name wrong, I am apologies. But Jennifer was a mental health tech long before JP Morgan Chase hired her as an architect. And Jermaine was selling landscaping gear long before SNHU hired him as an architect. And Delroy worked on ambulances long before CDW hired him as an architect. So it doesn't matter. And Yvonne was a waiter before AWS hired him. So I appreciate everything you've done. And you know what? Working in steel was pretty darn hard. So that probably built a little bit of mental toughness in you, and how tough you are and how much grit you have is a lot of the key to your success. And now you do something else. Your past doesn't define you. I mean, I've changed careers a whole bunch of times, and so many people have. And that's the blessing, is so many of us are blessed to live in an environment where we can change careers, where we can say, I've done this for a long period of time, like Nicole, who was a teacher, who now is working in cloud computing. The ability to change lives is, I think, one of the greatest gifts. So do what you love. And if you don't love doing it anymore, do something else that you love. And when you don't love doing that anymore, guess what? Do it again. You mentioned the approximate salary for new cloud architects. What would you say the salary percent increases once someone gains work experience? So, Ta 3000, I will tell you, and I don't want to mention his names too clearly because a lot of my students will know him. Came to me with a $150,000 job, and about a year later, he's got a job at Google for $409,000 job. I can tell you that I had some, what do you call it? Apparently, I've had. Sorry, I just got a message from my team about audio and video being out of sync. I can tell you that a lot of people that I've trained that have had a huge increase in performance. But realistically speaking, it's not your experience. It's never going to be your experience, TA 3000. I can have a cloud architect with 20 years experience that I pay this, and I can have a cloud architect with 3 years experience that I pay this, 100,000 more. So what do I pay my architects based on? Their ability to drive transformation. I pay based upon skill level. Years of experience is meaningless. I know people that were bad 20 years ago, and over 20 years, they've gotten worse. I know other people that are young, or by young, I don't care about their age. I mean, they may have just entered the career a year ago, but they're geniuses and they're rock stars. So it's based upon how good you are and how fast you learn and which skills you actually focus on. So that's really when I want to make sure that I understand, that you understand. That's what drives it. And that's why you can have two people. And I remember I started, and a friend of mine started the job at MCI WorldCom at the same time. Now, the person that joined with me had 10 years of experience, was brought in as a network engineer 3. I had 0 experience, and I was brought in as a network engineer 4. Within 3 months, he was still a network engineer 3, and all of a sudden, I was the lead of the architecture team. So the key was not the experience. The key is, I'm not joking. I literally went home and studied 1,000 pages each day. I stayed up all night, and I did anything I could to try to master what I did, and I got better. My friend put in 30 minutes a day of trying to get better. I nearly killed myself from training, but 6 months later, I was a CCIE. My friend got there 3 years later. So he ultimately, when he got the greater set of skills, he moved up too. And it all depends on how good you are. So that's what determines what your pay increases are. Are you developing yourself? Are you getting better skills? Are you able to create bigger architectures? Are you selling more of your architectural designs? Are you bringing more revenue in? Are your clients saying better things about you? That determines what you get your raise. And quite frankly, people like Yvonne and Jordan, who I trained from scratch, they've been in AWS as their first tech job. One was a waiter. One had a very similar non-tech job prior to getting hired, and they've both been promoted, and they've only been there for less than 3 years. So they've been there. But I'll tell you, there'll be other people that'll be there for 5 years that don't get promoted if they don't have the skills. So that's really going to talk about it. But the salary increase can be huge. I've seen people get a $200,000 and $300,000 or bigger increase with the right training, all focused on the right skills, digital transformation, leadership. And why are they the right skills? Well, all you have to do is start Googling on salaries for people with high levels of business acumen, and you'll go to salary.com and it'll tell you the average salary is $558,000 a year for people with good levels of business acumen. So what we're saying is get good levels of business acumen, get good levels of business transformation knowledge, marry that to the architecture career, be a great leadership and really make improvements, and you'll have no problem earning a good living and loving it. I know I retired from my main job at 34 years old because architecture took good care of me. We all live differently too. I live pretty simply too, but that's because that's the way I like to live. Great question. Please feel free to ask more, TA 3000. Okay, so let's get to the next question. Apologies about the voice and video being out of sync. Mike, we get the certification and practice creating cloud resources with your demo account, but how can we get hands-on to build a project? So the reason I asked if your goal was to be an architect or an engineer was as follows. Every time someone ever interviews with me to be a cloud architect and they try to show me what they built, I just said, thank you for proving me you're not an architect. And here's the reason for Wi-Fi is architects don't build anything. So if you're an architect, what are you doing? You're meeting with stakeholders. You're leading architecture teams. You're responding to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs. You're creating architectural artifacts. You're leading architectural review boards or participating in architectural review boards. You're working with architecture frameworks. You're creating architectural artifacts and architectural repositories. You're managing stakeholders. You're delivering architecture presentations. You're in sales meetings. You're meeting with vendors. You're facilitating meetings. And the only thing you don't do is touch the technology. So when someone comes in and they've somehow managed to interview for me with an architect and they say, look what I built. And I say, but that has nothing to do with architecture. That has everything to do with engineering. And they say, good, I understand the technology. And I say, okay, I see you've chosen an Nginx web server. What I'd like to know is why did you choose Nginx versus Apache? And I also want to know how you calculated the compute. How many cores did you think your application was going to need and how did you create that? How much DRAM did your application need and how did you actually create that? How many requests are you expecting per second on this web application? And what kind of storage did you need and how many IOs of storage performance do you think you need and what were the networking demands? Now, how did you want to secure this and what were the architectural trade-offs you considered by using a next generation firewall, a WAF, for example, or and I'd also like to know what were your data loss prevention strategies. So the person says, huh? And I said, well, you told me you created an architectural project, so I want to ask you about the architecture, not the building. Now, Faiz, by comparison, if you wanted to be a cloud engineer, now I would be very interested in what you built because that's the cloud engineer's job. And the real key is to know what a hands-on project is for your architect, for your career. For an architecture, a hands-on project is creating architectural documentation or a reference architecture, because that's what we do as architects, or giving an architectural presentation. For an engineer, it might actually be, and this FISE would be a real cloud engineer project for those cloud engineers. It would be completely worthless for the architect because the architect's design, not built. Now, a real cloud engineering project might be to spin up 300 servers in 3 different clouds, 500 container instances, set up your entire Kubernetes infrastructure. I'm not joking. Set up your demilitarized zones facing the internet, protecting those demilitarized zones with the right kind of firewalls and the right kind of policy procedures. If it's a web application, setting up a CDN and setting up a DDoS prevention, and then being able to explain what you did and how you built it. If you're an engineer, that would impress me. And why is it? Because that would be real world things. Now, you may actually have to spend some money actually build if you're trying to get some engineer real world experience. I know I did. I know I literally bought a whole bunch of servers when I was trying in my youth and routers, and I was building stuff, and that helped me a lot with my engineering, but it did nothing as an architecture career because they're very different. One way you could make it a whole lot cheaper to really get some experience, if your goal is to be an engineer, and again, if your goal is to be an architect, don't do any of this because it's not going to help you. But if your goal is to be engineer, what I'd probably do is I'd probably buy a refurbished server with, in today's world, about 48 cores and about 256 gigs of RAM. I'd smack a hypervisor on that thing and I'd build some virtual machines and I'd build some containers and I'd set up a Kubernetes container infrastructure management and I'd build up a private cloud like a Nutanix or an OpenStack cloud. I'd create virtual machines in that cloud. I would take that cloud and connect it to another cloud, be a VPN to make it more real life. Set it up, but that would get you hands-on, and that would also get you to see what it is without actually seeing the cloud provider. And I'd set up a hypervisor. I'd create all kinds of things. I'd set up an Active Directory server. I'd set up Linux machines. Because if you're a cloud engineer, you're going to have to understand how to administer Windows and Active Directory and Terraform and Linux and Python, for example, and even Windows PowerShell. Now, if you're a cloud architect, by comparison, you're not going to touch the technology. You're going to have to deliver presentation and sell and lead an architecture team. And that's why I need to know what career you actually want, because the career you want will determine what the right skills are. For an architect, you show me what you built, I'm going to say, then you're not an architect, you're an engineer. It's going to almost scare me like you don't know what it is. For example, if you look at who builds things, and I'm not sure what part of the world you're in, but for example, when I go to the Middle East, let's say I was in Dubai, or I was at Jumeirah, at the Emirates Towers one time, and Jumeirah Beach Hotel at another time, and in the Burj Al Arab, you look at the Burj Al Arab, it is the most beautiful hotel I've ever seen. And it's built on some water, and it looks like a sailboat, and there's this beautiful helipad on it. I mean, this is the most beautiful thing. You go in the lobby, they've got water jets that shoot high. I mean, this thing is incredible, right? But it's an architect that designed it. It's a different set of people that actually build it. And that's why when architects try to show me what they build, I'm like, no, show me your plans. Show me your blueprints. Yes, but show me what you built. No, because the construction people don't get hired to design the architecture. A different set of people design it. A different set of people build it. I hope that helps. So let me know what career you want, and then I'll happily help you. I'm aware in detection engineering, what kind of experience can navigate us to security architecture? So what do you mean you're aware of detection engineering? Could you tell me what you mean by that? Or if you're in detection engineering, because detection engineering could be a lot of different things. For example, are you in surveillance? In physical surveillance, are you setting up other types of surveillance things, which can be did by move and infrared and other types of detection? Are you dealing with some kind of network-based IDS, IPS? So I really don't know what you actually mean in terms of detection engineering. If you can be a little more clear with that, I can help you. But what I can tell you is that in most cases, engineering will not get you to an architecture role without training for architecture. Sometimes it will, and sometimes it won't. And I'll tell you the difference. Generally speaking, there's two kinds of engineers, and some of these roles tend to lend themselves very well to architecture roles, and some of them roles don't lend themselves at all. The roles that don't lend themselves at all are roles where people are on the command line typing all day, every day. Those roles don't translate at all. Why? Because those roles have absolutely nothing to do with what we do. Now, there are some engineers that we work with, and instead of basically spending their time working all day and doing stuff, they're determining, well, if I do it this way, we have these engineering trade-offs. If I do it this way, we have these engineering trade-offs. These two problems. Okay, so after we evaluated these two problems, let's compare about them and other parts of our system. Now, these people that I'm talking about, these performance optimization, these performance tuning people, these are experts in the technology. They know every component of the technology, how all the protocols and technology works, the strengths, the weaknesses, the limitations of the technology, and they can push it around. So basically, they're advising. And they're the one, for example, like the equivalent of the security engineer that says, they're the security engineer that's going to look at this firewall and say, well, this firewall that can do 20 gigs, it says it can do 100 gigs of throughput. When we turn these features on, can only do 1.32 gigs of stateful throughput with this features and functionality. Now, in order to do this, we're going to need this many of them. Or here's the weakness in this thing. The weakness here then becomes here. Now, that engineer that's really getting geeky into that, those move very well into specialty technical architects later in life. Because what they're doing is they're not actually doing the work. They're doing planning, and architecture is about planning. Those engineers that are just coding and configuring all day without doing heavy planning of evaluating the implications of what they do tend not to carry over very well. So I tend not to know. What I will tell you is when you look at architecture to engineering career transitions, they're not typically who you would think would have the easiest time that would actually have the easiest time. And I'm going to read you a skill list. And I'm going to tell you why I'm going to read you the skill list. So let's say that I wanted to hire a security architect. And I train lots of architects, and I've hired lots of security architects over the years, and I've done a lot of the work. What do I have to be good at as a security architect? Well, for one thing, I have to be able to do is I have to be able to sell. I have to have strong communication skills. I have to have great presentation skills. I have to have executive presence. I have to have vendor management skills. I have to have negotiation skills. I'm going to have business acumen, CXO relevancy, leadership, stakeholder management skills. And now if it's in security, now I'm also going to need to understand the network and the data center concepts. I'm also going to need to know the various components of security: network security, IAM security, application security, for example, encryption, disaster recovery, business continuity planning, security policies, creation of security procedures, creation of security guidelines, creation of incident response and incident response procedures. So what you'll find is an engineer may know one of those 30 different domains, and that's where they've spent their life. By comparison, the architect focuses on all of those domains. So, people often ask me, is my engineering background going to help me? And I'm going to say, yes. And then they're going to say, people are going to say, but if I don't have an engineering background, does it matter? And then I say, no. And then they say, why is that the case? And I say, so let's say you have a sales rep. A good executive sales rep has CXO relevancy. They have business acumen. They've got leadership skills. They've got sales skills. They've got stakeholder management skills. They've got strong communication skills. They've got great presentation skills, executive presence, vendor management, negotiation skills. They already have these skills. Now, what do they have to learn? Let's say they're a cloud architect: network design skills, compute design skills, storage design skills, security design skills, big data design skills, and cloud design skills, and even some AI skills. So the sales rep only has to learn the tech. But what if we have a software developer that knows applications, and the software developer still needs to learn cloud design skills, security design skills, storage design skills, compute design skills, and network design skills? But now they also have to learn all those business skills, like the sales skills, executive presence, leadership skills, negotiation skills, presentation skills. And that's why often you take a sales rep or a teacher, and they get hired faster than an engineer does, because they have more of the skills already. But it doesn't matter. I've trained engineers from all over the world and gotten them great architect jobs. And I've taken people with non-tech backgrounds and gotten them jobs too, like Wallace, for example, whose first job was at JP Morgan Chase as an enterprise architect. Or they would be Emmanuel, who just recently got hired in the UK, or Nafuli, whose first tech job was a CTO role. It doesn't matter. It's all about your level of education. So it's not your experience, it's your knowledge, it's your capabilities. Join us on the architecture webinar, and we can talk to you about what those capabilities are. But it's not experience. I can give you example after people have been hired by companies with no experience. Al got hired as a senior solutions architect at Deloitte after our training. That was his first tech job ever. He used to sell tissues and consumer products for Kimberly-Clark. Not your academy, not your background, always your skills. You totally could have answered all those engineering questions you just asked. Well, wonderful. And you just realized how your resume is not so ready. Well, if you can do that, that is absolutely great. Just find a resume person and go out there if that's the case. Please feel free to ask any questions. I really want to do anything I can to help your career. I don't want you to be like me, who when I started my career, they're like, and I was leaving healthcare then, and I said, I want to get a tech job. And they said, you need a Microsoft certified systems engineer. And I said, why do I need that certification? And the school I called said, you just have to, it's your fundamentals. So I wasted $5,000. And this is, we're going back 25 years ago. And that 5,000 is like 15,000 in today, because they didn't have online things. You had to be there, and they had to pack classes and pay instructors lots of money. So, I paid $5,000 for that boot camp. And then when no one would hire me, and they said, well, Mike, you need a CCNP, and we got an $11,000 boot camp, which I took. Now I did a CCNA on my own. And then I had all these certifications, and I just took loans for both of them because I didn't have the money to pay for them. And the next thing they said, well, when nobody would hire me, well, Mike, you need a CCDP. So I took a CCDA, a CCDP, and nobody hired me. And then I had a chance to speak with some recruiters and some executives and find out what employers wanted. They told me that level of skills, and poof, I was hired, and it changed my life overnight. And that's why I'm here to do this for you. So let me get back to some questions. Pablo, this is a great question. So for a cloud engineering role, if you have the necessary skills for a job but not the certification, are you still worth interviewing, or do you need the certification? So Pablo, it depends. Now, if you have a friend that's going to introduce you, then you don't need the certification. You only need the skills. If you've been an expert at going out there and creating content, and we teach our students how to create content, and you know how to show the employers how to come to you, then you don't need any certifications because the world's coming to you. I still recommend certifications. I strongly, strongly do earlier in your career. But all the certifications realistically do is they give you the ability to get an interview. I am totally happy to hire people with no certifications. Totally happy to hire somebody without certifications. But I need the skills. And how good does the person have that skills? For that cloud engineer, how well do they know infrastructure as code? If I'm looking for a cloud engineer, what is their knowledge and capabilities with DevOps tools? If I have a cloud engineer, how good are their Linux skills? Are they Red Hat certified engineer good or better? Because that's my minimum for a cloud engineer. I'm not looking for somebody who's got junior level skills. AI has junior level skills. If I'm dealing with an engineer, I need somebody with good Linux skills. And I want them to have good Windows skills. And I want them to have good scripting skills. And that means Bash Shell and Windows PowerShell. And that means I want that user knowing how to install applications and patching kernels and updating kernels and compiling it. Because if I'm dealing with an engineer, I need a technical expert. But when I've got someone with really great automation skills and hands-on engineering skills and deep engineering knowledge, if I interview them, I'll hire them. I don't care about a certification, neither there's any other hiring manager. But the key is, how did they get that interview in the first place? Now, if you've got a network of people that's going to send you there, skills you need. You don't need the certification. But I'll tell you, for the average person, getting 2 to 3 professional certifications will get you an interview. And that, to me, is highly, highly valuable. But they won't get you more than the interview. So when somebody gets 40 certifications, I still can't hire them, because 2 things happen. One is now they have a bunch of junior level skills in 20 different people's careers, as opposed to being all the skills in one job. So the key is, what are the role you're applying for, and do you have the skills, and how good are your skills, and how good are your sales skills, and how are your marketing skills? Now, let's be serious here. I've got 2 people, and I can't make a decision which one I hire. Everything about them is exactly equal. Probably hire the certified person, because they probably look more motivated on paper, the willingness to go above and beyond and do it. Now, I've got a person with 10 certifications, but here's their skill level. And I've got a person with 0 certifications, and here's their skill level. This is the person I hire. But the world's not black and white, on, off, binary. We're going to be scaling and rating people on a bunch of things. So if you've got great marketing skills, don't worry about a certification. If you don't have great marketing skills, get a certification. If you really want to get them down, get the best career skills. But I say get the best career skills and get the best certifications. And I'm saying learn how to brand yourself, learn how to sell yourself, and have everything. Have it all. That's why, our approach, the certifications plus the actual skills being hired. Our competition basically teaches the certification and none of the skills. And that's why people come to us from everybody's boot camp and years of cloud projects that have nothing to do with architecture roles. And then we train them, and it's easy to get them rehired. But it's all about skills, all about skills, all about skills. But you got to get the interview. So keep that in mind. Idris, thank you for the compliment. Don't worry about butchering your name. We will get that sorted when you join. Idris, when you're on Zoom and we can actually talk, if I got your name wrong, please tell me. I really do care, and I want to get it right. But in the meantime, I'm thrilled you're here. Good evening from Burkina Faso. Well, I am so happy to see you there. See you. Thank you. Would I allow someone without tech experience into the tech leadership program? Why not? It's basically an MBA type program that's optimized towards technical things, but honestly, it would work for all of them. We have 3 people with MBAs teaching in that program. We have 2 PhD business school professors who've created content for that program. And it's an incredibly great leadership program. So absolutely, we'd be fine with you on that. Although, if your goal was an architecture career, I would tell you it's probably better to just do the elite architect program because you'll not only get the tech leadership program and the interview program, but you'll have the cloud architect courses from me during the day. You'll have the cloud architect programs from David Lithicum, who's got an extensive experience as a CEO, chief technology officer, chief information officer, chief cloud architect, enterprise architect. So, he and I both co-teach these. But yeah, we'd love to see you in the tech leadership program. But I know you asked about the elite program earlier. That actually includes the tech leadership program as well as other executive training. That might be good for you. But whatever is there, we'd be happy to help you. And the 60% will work on either one while we're celebrating our anniversary. Thanks, Mike, for the answer. You're currently working as a database administrator working in information projects for cloud and on-prem. You're looking to build your cloud architect role. Excellent. And I'm glad you asked. And now you can understand the difference. And that's why I asked. Because if you're designing a strategy, that's very different than building a project that just shows it. I'm like, when you get the certification practice creating resources with your demo account, how can we build a project? So that's the key. That's what we're talking about. When you ask this project, well, that's why we asked which career you were going to. Because building things doesn't impress me as an architect. But now that I know what you did, if you created a reference architecture, for example, if you had talked about how to optimize creating a reference architecture to optimize creating a reference architecture for streaming of real-time data to 3 clouds at the same time, that could be interesting. Or if you created something you could create an architectural strategy to take through, analyze, mine, and make inferences in real time due to streaming data. Again, that would be an architecture thing to do. I say this because you mentioned DBA. Now, at the same time, even if you wrote an architecture on how to scale relational databases, data best practices, and you talked about where read replicas came in and where caching came in and where queuing came in and where partitioning came in, again, this is something that would talk about more architecture things. So I know you asked this earlier, and then we asked you what you wanted to do, and we talked about the difference. But that is the difference here. You'd be creating strategies, or could you create a reference architecture for the data lake of the future? I don't know. Where you take things out of say relational databases and NoSQL databases and data warehouses and various forms of unstructured data, and what kind of cataloging tools could you use and what kind of AI tools could you use with it, and then what could you do out of that? Well, again, that would be an architecture thing. So more about design. And it's not just designing the tech, because the tech by itself is not architecture, it's engineering. It's the tech and its impact to the business. Hopefully you can join us tomorrow on our Cloud Architect webinar. I think you'll have a good time. We can meet. We'll talk face-to-face. We'll get this out of audio video sync that we had problems with the internet, which wasn't here when we started, which apparently stopped later. And we'll get all that taken care of. It'll be live on Zoom, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And even see if you're ready. Live on Zoom, it'll be on a webinar tomorrow. My team will drop that link in the chat box again. Charlene, you learned a lot from us today. I am so happy. That's why we're here. Come, please, ask your questions, anything we can do to assist you. We are 100% focused on helping people with cloud architect, solutions architect, security architect, enterprise architect, AI architect careers, because that's our world. That's all we do. Randy, you're an application architect and your goal is to be certified cloud architect, but you've been too busy. Should I push through it and will it help? So it all depends on really where you want to spend your life, Randy. You can spend your life as an application architect, which is focusing on the design of applications to optimize business performance. And that's great if you're happy. Now, by comparison, if your goal was to move into something bigger, and by bigger, I mean closer to the business, more strategic, where you're basically focusing on what does their network need to look like, what does their security need to look like, what does their application profile need to look like, what do their workflows need to look like, what does their storage need to look like, for example, and then you're moving more up into a cloud architecture and enterprise architect role. I think you'll actually have many more career options. You'll typically face higher pay if that's your goal. But it's not going to be the certification as a cloud architect that's going to take you there. Right now, you're an application architect. You're basically focused on one domain of the cloud architecture, the application domain, but you still need to learn the storage domain. And there'd be a lot more that would probably go into the compute domain. And there'd be a lot more that would go into security. And there'd be a lot more that would go into identity, which is different than security, typically speaking. And there'd be a lot more that would go into unified communications and others. And I think it's fun. Now, if I loved being an application architect, I'd love being an application architect, and I think it's great. For example, I love network architecture, and that's what I did. And I spent about a decade of my life as a network architect. And then fairly technically focused, but it was focused on the network and the network to provide competitive advantage, where the application architects focused on the application's competitive advantage. I'll tell you, when I moved up into bigger architecture roles like enterprise architecture, and cloud architecture is almost as close as you're going to get to enterprise architecture. Boy, all of a sudden my job was better. I got treated with more respect. My earnings went up dramatically. My workload and stress level went down. And as much as we are basically facilitators in any kind of architect role, like a cloud architect, application architect, network architect, here this is a pure business facilitation and architect facilitation role. You're the facilitator and the coordinator of all the architects that are with you. And I kind of love that role. But for me, it's there. But the application architect role is a great role. The cloud architect role is a great role. The security architect role is a great role. It all determines how happy you are. But the certification by itself won't be enough to teach you cloud architecture. I can tell you that right now. After taking many, many, many application architects and training them to be cloud architects. Great background, just completely different set of, in many cases, a lot of different skills needed. But a lot of carryover skills too, like Sal's. Great question, Randy. Please ask more. I'm thrilled you're here. What is the average duration for someone to obtain a role as a cloud architect? 1 year, 2 year, 3 years? It depends on their level of training and how fast they learn and how much time they learn. I will tell you, Richard Owen, I won't mention his last name, left my program and he decided to take a technical account manager job at Amazon. And he was with me for about 3 weeks. I will tell you, Delroy landed his first security role in about a year. I will tell you, Yvonne and Jordan, two best friends that were in college. They were both the students at Georgia Tech. One was working as a waiter. They were hired by AWS in approximately 6 months. But they both had very good communication skills, and they were both super, super smart. I will tell you that Jennifer, who was a mental health tech, was with us about 10 months before she got hired. I will tell you that Jeffrey W., before he got hired at Kaylee, was about 4 or 5 months. He was pretty quick. I will also tell you that Richard F. was with us for about a year from the time he got hired. And then I'll give you an example of Jawad, who was a cloud engineer for a decade. And Jawad was an awesome engineer, but just to show you the difference between engineers and architects, it took us about a year. And a lot of times when we deal with an engineer, we have to teach them how to not think like an engineer, because engineers have a structured way of doing things which they need to do for our job. And we have a completely different way. So there was that. I could tell you that Noah took us about a year, but he was a social worker for getting hired. And at the same time, I can tell you, Al took about 14 months from the time we started training him, but he got hired as a senior solutions architect. I can tell you, Pierre took us about probably 16 to 18 months before he got hired at LeaseWeb, but his last job was a sailboat operator. And then I can tell you that Vladimir was 24 years old, and I think he was with us for about 6 to 8 months before he got his first job. So the key is it all depends on how fast you learn and how much time you actually have to study. For example, I became a CCIE in less than 9 months. Most people don't do it in 10 years, but I studied all day, every day. And I literally stayed up half of the night almost every day and read all day. My friends that I studied with were watching TV and having a good time with it. They were going out with their friends. I was obsessive compulsive about studying, so I got through it faster. But as long as you do the right training, you'll get there. But if you train with us, you can stay on our program until you're hired. The online part of the program, when you log into our portal and our Slack, that never goes away for you. So you'll stay on our program if you ever train with us until you're hired. We're not a boot camp. We have experts that train people, and we continue doing the training until you're hired, and you stay in our program until you're hired, because that's the only way we know how to do things. So kind of hope that's an answer. But join us in the webinar tomorrow, and we'll talk. Is TOGAF training a certification? So yes. Well, let's talk about what TOGAF is. TOGAF is a framework. And like anything else in technology, you can get certified in it. So the reason we have TOGAF is a framework that says, how do you treat your clients? How do you start by figuring out the vision, the scope for the architecture, figure out, for example, what the business architecture is and the future business architecture, and then look at the data, the applications, and the technology, where they are versus where they need to go, and create governance solutions, etc. So it's more of a step-by-step process. If you train with us, we will train you for TOGAF, and then of course you could take the TOGAF certification from the open group if you desire. But TOGAF is both a architectural framework, and yes, they do have a certification on that. And we include TOGAF training in all of our enterprise and cloud type architecture programs, much more in an enterprise architect program, because we want all of our architectures to be to provide transformation, not just make tech that works. The firm really prioritizes data loss prevention. What areas should be sharp on? Everything we previously described. So what I might want to do if I was you is I'd probably do some reconnaissance. Could you potentially find out what technology they are using, and what could you learn more about that technology? Understand that technology, the way it works, how it could be used, its competitive advantages versus others, its strengths and weaknesses versus something else. For that, that's what I would tell you, but I don't know more until I actually know the company and exactly what the people are saying, not necessarily the job description. But if you focus on all those things we told you before, I think you'll be good. Oh, John, this is a dangerous one. I want to help you here. You're an architect, but you know your stuff with engineering. Yep, that's good. At times when you do architecture designs, you still do a mini proof of code concept with code, etc. Okay. Let's talk about the implications of that for your career. Is it okay? I'm going to recommend you don't do this, and why. And you do this with engineers to demonstrate value to them. John Smith, your goal is not to ever demonstrate value with engineers. Your goal is to show the business how you can improve their business performance. Two things happen the second you try to show your value to the engineers. One is you just cost yourself $100,000 to $200,000 a year, because now as soon as everybody sees you as the proof of concept code person, they no longer see you as an executive strategist. So those $500,000 architecture jobs never going to be there for you until you actually change your opinion, people's opinion of you. You have to come in there as a strategist. And John, I can tell you, early on in my architecture career, I actually did what you're talking about, had a conversation with my manager, got some executive coaches, pretended I didn't know how to do these things, started coordinating things, started showing up to work in Armani suit, started dealing with smoothing things out, and another $100,000 raise came within 6 months. So, John, I recommend you not doing that. I recommend you show your value to the leadership. I recommend you increase your business acumen, you increase your executive presence, and you drive real value for your clients. That means learning how the people work. That means improving how they work, improving the way they do their jobs, improving customer outcomes, decreasing operational inefficiencies and operational expenses, and helping that architectural organization increase their revenue. Don't let them see you as a techie. And John, once you start reaching these $300,000, $500,000, and $800,000 jobs, it's going to be totally different. So I can tell you, when I was at Cisco, one of the vice presidents at Cisco says, Mike, can we talk about your business cards? And I'm like, yeah, do I still have any of them here? Yeah, I'll show you what I actually had to do. Bear with me for a second. You'll find this interesting. So when I was at Cisco, I finally found my way to an executive architect role. And when I reached this architect role, life was good. I was very happy. And my manager said to me, Mike, he said, can we get rid of the CCIE from your business card? Can we get rid of the CISSP from your business card? And I was, what? 2 most valuable certifications. And you can see what my business card became if I can get this close enough to the calendar. You see, I put my name there. I was in healthcare, so I listed that I used to be a nurse. I put my nurse practitioner, my master's degree, and my MBA. And you know what I didn't have on that card? My CCIE or my CISSP. And the reason is my manager said, do you want to be seen as an executive architect with a career that's going to the top? Or Mike, do you want to be seen as the techie? The engineers aren't your boss. The engineers work for you, John. So take good care of those engineers. Take them to dinner. Take them to drinks. If they train them in professional development leadership, help them get a 6-figure raise. That's how you gain the respect of the engineers, not by showing you that they're good at their job. I worked with engineers and, help them get a $100,000 raise, help them get multiple promotions. I got a lot of engineers that respect me. I'm not going to disrespect the engineers by pretending to be I'm good at their job. I'm going to thank those engineers and be great. Now, here's why it matters. And here's why it's kind of why you really can't ever touch the technology. I'm going to show you two pictures, and this is why I never touch the technology and I never let my architects touch the technology. And truth be told, John, if you're in most companies and you touch the client's technology, you'll be escorted out by security. It'll be the end of your career. But here's the reason why. So I want to share a photo of you. I took this photo, and I want you to look at it for a minute. Because here's my architect that's zoomed in. Now, Chris, can you share this for me? And remove the thing on the bottom. So here's my architect that's now zoomed in on a particular technology. Since my architect wants to present themselves to the engineer as an engineer, instead of bringing in lunches like they could do, instead of making sure the thing goes smoothly, instead of being the coordinator and the facilitator between the client's executives and your engineers, you're now doing what the engineers are, which is focused on what's in front of you. Now, here's the problem with being what's focused on in front of you. I promise you're not looking at the organization's compound annual growth rate and what you're going to do with it. I promise you're not examining business processes. Now, here's the worst part of it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the other half of this photo. And when you're busy focused, and that's why when you're a strategist and an architect is a strategist, you're typically not on the battlefield. And that's why the admirals and generals are typically not on the battlefield. They're in a central command location. So here's what you see right now. Now I'm going to show you what was actually going on. I want you to see what was really going on in my backyard at the time where I took that photo. And this is why architects should never be getting close to the technology. Chris, please share this. What was really going on in that photo that I showed you was when I zoomed in, you could see the squirrel, and the squirrel looked cute. Now, here's the reality. Here was what was going on in this photo. My cat, Cindy, that cute little girl with the pointy little ears and the little tail over there, she was building her master plan to eat the squirrel. And business has constant competition. There's always somebody that wants to eat that business alive. And once you play on the strategy team, you can no longer play on the field. And I get it. I did it early. I know that you want to gain the respects of the engineers, but they're not the people that give you raises. They're not the people that promote you. They're not the people that determine how many restricted stock units you get that year. Or do you get a normal bonus, or do you get a $100,000 bonus, or you get a $150,000 bonus based upon the work you did? They're the people I want you to impress. They're the people I want you to focus on. That's going to be the secret to your career. Help the engineers in another way. I've taught lots of engineers leadership, made many engineers managers, many engineers directors, VPs, architects. Help them that you work with. They'll love you, and you'll actually help them with something, and then you'll get to your goals and you'll move up too. Great question, John. Of course, we can bring in the next one. Which course should you choose, security architect or enterprise architect? Which ones will help you improve more? It all depends what you want to do. If you want to move into an enterprise architecture role, and to me, the enterprise architect is really a chief technology officer. So depending upon how well you do in that enterprise architect role, you either move into the CIO or the CTO role. That's typically your career path, or move into some executive role. I personally love both roles. I've done roles. I enjoy the business side more because it's a little less stressful for me to be on the business side. I'm having more meetings. This is me in my youth. I'll wear shorts, a t-shirt, and flip-flops. But when I take on my enterprise architecture roles, I put on my good clothes. I meet with stakeholders. I have a special set of Armani and Canelli suits for enterprise architecture consulting, and I don't wear it the rest of the time, like almost ever, because it's just not me. This is me. But I have that. Now, when I go in as a security architect, I can do my golf shirt. I focus on more of my expertise in security, expertise in risk reduction, and a little bit less on my business acumen and polish. They're both great. Salaries for both right now are fairly similar. Now, the reason for that is there are so many security roles that are open, and no one has the skills. I mean, no one. You interview 1,000 people, for example, that have certifications, and you ask them any basic questions, and you've got nothing out there in the way of people that can do these security architect roles. But here's the reality. Here's how bad many of the other architects have done. 70 to 80% of the time when people actually move to the cloud or they build a data center or anything, they get no value out of it. Imagine spending $1 billion and getting nothing for it. I mean, seriously. And what is the tie that ties that organization's people, processes, and technology together? That's the enterprise architect. And because of that, the enterprise architecture roles can get very big and strategic. Security architect will take you to the CISO level. Enterprise architect will take you more to the CIO level. Enterprise architect, more business strategic. Security architect, more specialty technical. And they are both good. You will have fun with absolutely either or. I can tell you, and I've done all these kind of roles, they are the most fun roles. They are so much easier than others, and I think you'd be happy in either one. But I'd ask yourself, do you want to be an expert on one thing, security, or do you want to be more of a generalist, more of a business executive focused on all the pieces and parts of an organization and making it successful? Both are great. The choice is up to you. Currently building a portfolio online. Do I also upload cloud architecture documents that align with industry standards? So I don't know what you mean by building or portfolio online. Now, engineers have a GitHub. I don't know what managers check GitHubs unless it's for a software developer. Architects don't have portfolios online, generally speaking. My portfolio are things that I talk about on my resume. Designed a $1.1 billion deal to modernize a global retail. I'm trying to think about it. Or designed the medical grade network, a reference architecture for organizations of all sizes to achieve high availability, high security healthcare documents. And we're talking about a 250-page architecture document. It's not just a picture. So that's a body of work. Now, if you write an article and it gets published in a magazine, that's there. If you create a blog and it's not like the normal ChatGPT written something, but you create something and use some levels of expertise, we're talking about something different. So, maybe what I can do is I can share this with you. Let me see if I still have this. And if I have this on my desktop, I'll share it with you to show you what I mean. Have this. So let me walk you through. I do have one. Let me show you an architectural document that I actually wrote at Cisco. And I want to show you what I'm talking about as an architecture document. Chris, can you help me share this? It should say medical grade network on it. So this is the kind of architecture document I would say you get published. And let me bring it to my front desk so I'm not staring at a migraine. So you can see I wrote this with my friend. The first thing that goes in an architecture document is a table of contents. Now, in this case, it was a reference architecture for every type of clinical architecture you can imagine. Now, you can notice as I'm describing the architecture, we're actually dealing with a fair number of pages here, 128 pages. So the first thing is what it's going to do for the business, because it's an architecture, and it's talking about how to optimize. And then it's showing the healthcare ecosystem of things that we're dealing with. And then we're talking about what organizations need to be connected to what organizations. Make sure you can see this. And I want to show you what I mean by an architecture. So now we describe it. And then when this was the way you would do more of a service-oriented architecture, because that was common in those days. But you can see how we look at the elements and the modules of an architecture. We describe what we're dealing with at each layer of the architecture. And then what you could see is I had reference solutions for various things, what you would do in a metropolitan area, for example, which I showed here. Things that would have to be in a data center, for example. Things that would have to be on a campus. And these are high-level architectures. These are guidelines. What would you do in a doctor's office or a clinic, for example? And what you notice is most of it is explanation. And very little of it is actual pictures, but this is real enterprise architecture documentation. Documentation that Cisco thought was valuable enough to publish all over the world. Now, I present this architecture to across hundreds of thousands of miles. I've been in every continent you can think of talking to people, whether it was the country of Scotland, the Victorian province, whether it was in Melbourne, Australia, Sydney, Australia, any health system you can imagine in the United States, because we're talking about what's going on. And then you notice we're talking about dealing with everything from denial of service to data center security. It's covering everything. And you can see I'll scroll through further as you walk through, where in this case, we're talking about securing the phone system. I'll go drop down another 20 pages so you can see what are we doing with regards to secure wireless in the healthcare organization? How do we secure it? Now, this is a couple of years old, but you can see we dealt with security, we dealt with the infrastructure, we dealt with the wireless. Now we're dealing with unified communications and getting people collaborating. And, we're only halfway through, so I'll walk you through another component. And now we would over here, we were talking about, signaling, phone calls, for example, admission control. I want you to notice, look how what's written here and the way it's mostly text, mostly tables, and mostly documents. Now, I can tell you this document has been used throughout the world. And even in the end, we have to explain what language we mean by actually showing, for an example, a glossary to make sure everybody's speaking on the same terms in the same language. So that's what an architectural document is. So if you're going to create architectural documentation, make it architectural documentation. Make it show that you understand architecture, that you are an architect, but make sure you do it right. If you don't know what to do when you put the wrong message out there, you actually showed people that you don't know what architecture is. And it serves the opposite problem. And it says, please don't hire me. I don't know what the job is. So do create architecture document. Do be able to present it. Do be able to frame it, but make sure you're doing it in a way that's going to show you as an architect. So I hope that really helps. I really wanted to give you every advantage I could with an answer. So I showed you a document I wrote 20 years ago, would be something that would be there. And yeah, you're not going to be able to put your client's artifacts up there because you're going to have a signed a non-disclosure agreement. So you're still going to be able to talk about anything that you've done industry-wide, for example. And that's kind of the difference between a solutions architect and the kind of work that I would do. The solutions architect would be working with very small things. Here you would see I was crafting something for an entire industry that would shape an industry across the globe in terms of how to improve security, availability, and in performance in delivering healthcare to others. So I really do hope that helped. Tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I will be hosting a webinar on how to become a cloud architect. If your goal is to be an enterprise architect, a security architect, an AI architect, come to the webinar anyway, because after we talk about the cloud architect role, we'll answer any questions you have about any of these roles. And we'll do anything we can on this free webinar to really help you build that career. And if you want our training or any of our training, take advantage of the 60% off. But whether you are interested in our training or not, we're happy to have you on this webinar. We're happy to talk about the skills of the career and make sure you know all the skills you're going to need to be successful in your cloud architect, security architect, AI architect, enterprise architect, or cloud architect career. Thank you all for joining me today. I look forward to seeing so many of you on the webinar tomorrow. If you had a good time, maybe like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell to be notified of new videos to assist you in your technology career. Let me know who you are. Give me a hashtag cloud architect, security architect, AI architect, enterprise architect on the way out. Love to know who you are so I know how to make more content to help you all learn more and get to your goals. Take care, everyone, and I hope to see you on the webinar tomorrow.